Sunday after Easter is usually about the worst attended Sunday in the church year, because people think, well, I went to church on Easter, I can take a Sunday off. But no, you're here. I also noticed that, like good Unitarian Universalists, you avoid the first row as though it's communicable. And in case you don't know me, I am a retired UU clergy person. But I'm more than that. I am a born Unitarian Universalist. It's the only religion I've ever been a part of for any length of time, which meant I was going to Sunday school and youth group until I was 17 years old. And one of the lessons I learned over and over again in those years was, well, when I was young, we called it the thinking man's religion. Anyone remember that phrase from long ago? Implying that those who were not Unitarians didn't think. But what it was trying to say is it's okay to raise questions. It's okay to have doubts. I'm sure that's still true for all of you. Now, you may know the other saying, beware of what you wish for because you just might get it. If you're going to be skeptical and dubious about that religion and that religion, you ought to be just as skeptical and dubious about your own. Which is to say, I am often skeptical about my Unitarian Universalism. That doesn't mean I don't believe it's right or that it's false, but I want to ask again and again, what is it we're trying to do? We have values that you might say qualify as self-evident, like in the Declaration of Independence. They're just so. Who would question them? I'm going to question one of them today. Not that you're going to change, nor do I want you to, but I want to peer beyond the obvious. And that is the one that Karen mentioned, but not alone. Almost every congregation says that everyone is welcome. Now, we don't want to say the opposite, obviously, but my skeptical sense wants to ask, why? Why are we saying everyone is welcome? Have we articulated that? Do we agree on what we're saying when we say everyone is welcome? Are there people we would not welcome if they presented themselves? Do we welcome those who would not welcome us? It's complicated. I like complicated, and you're going to learn why. Now, some of you might be thinking, he's trying to mess with our heads. I am. And that's the advantage of being a guest speaker. I can throw down a gauntlet, I can be provocative, and I am out the door. But I would say any value worth holding is worth interrogating over and over again. And so I want to dig a little bit into this self-evident idea of welcoming, not to dissuade you from it, but to unfold things that might not be evident the further you go. For one thing, we are not unique in saying that. I live downtown Grand Rapids. I walk all over to try to stay healthy. I pass the Presbyterian church, the Methodist church, the Congregationalist church, and every one of them has a sign outside that says, all are welcome. Are they not doing the same thing we're doing? Do they mean the same thing we mean? Chances are they mean some of the same things we mean because these are progressive churches and they want the LGBTQ plus community to know that they will not find a problem in their house. Given that the Methodists and the Presbyterians and the Congregationalists have all struggled with this, they're flying their rainbow flag by saying all are welcome. But it goes beyond that. There is a difference because you can go in there and they will welcome you, but if you stay long enough, they'll want you to be a Christian, won't they? Or if not, they want you to be okay with them being Christian and talking about it even if you don't. In other words, there is a point at which we are different in our welcoming. Here's the question. If being Christian is what unites the Methodists with the Methodists and the Congregationalists with the Congregationalists, what unites us after we say you're welcome? What is the thing that we are united around. So here's my first provocative thought. People don't come to us seeking to be Unitarian Universalists. They don't. They do come to be accepted. What unites many of us, if not all of us, is the experience of being unwelcome somewhere else at some point in our lives. I used to say that most Unitarian Universalists are those who were left out, cast out, or walked out of some other place and landed here. You all share the story of exile, which is why welcoming is so important. That is our common story, not our beliefs, not our history, but the experience of being an outsider, except for people like me, who never came in at all. So now you may grasp that the irony is that in Unitarian Universalism, I am the outsider, because I've been an insider and I do not have the story almost all of you have. I do not share your experience. But I understand. Being accepted is primal to us, deeper than almost any value we have. That's what makes us sometimes seem to bend over backward to make sure we accept everyone. Think of the lengths we have gone. Weekly welcomes that in some churches enumerate one group after another to make sure we don't leave anyone out. Ever-changing inclusive language. Are they homeless or unhoused? Large print bulletins for those who need visual aids. Sometimes ASL interpreters for those who have hearing impairments. Fragrance-free areas. It's the sort of stuff that for others becomes the great source of jokes about our ways of doing things. Wise or foolish. All of that comes from a deep place about who we are, the place where everyone can be accepted. So the first provocative point was, people don't come here to be religious, they come here to be accepted. Next provocative thought. Why do we do that? Well, for that I need to, why should we accept people? Now, for that I have to tell you a story. Before I was a Unitarian Universalist minister, I was a failed musician. Witness my help last time. I say a failed musician because that was not my career. I discovered at university that everyone else had talent. My future was very dubious. But while I was there, I took part in campus musical productions. We did Broadway shows. And I was the conductor of the little orchestra. Loved doing that. And one of those productions we did was one of Cabaret. You may know it. It's a dark comedy set in a louche cabaret in late Weimar Germany as the Nazi movement is rising. And it opens with a master of ceremonies in rather garish makeup singing Willkommen, bienvenue, or welcome, 3 languages. Here's the next 3 words. Fremde, étranger, stranger. That song came to mind as I was thinking about why we welcome and what it means. On the surface as words, it could be a Sunday morning greeting. We might substitute Spanish, but we could say bienvenue, bienvenidos, welcome. We want to say Spanish, that's important. But we would not say Fremde, étranger, stranger. We don't like the word stranger because we were all strangers once, and it was an outsider moment, wasn't it? Something about the word stranger itself seems unwelcoming. You're a stranger here. And to my skeptical mind, that's the word we ought to turn around in our minds a little more, turn over a little bit. Why? Because this is my third provocative notion. Spirituality comes from encountering strangeness, not familiarity. This thought was the subject of one of the first sermons I ever preached in seminary. And I know that because I'm going through all my old papers and it showed up, which is one of the reasons I'm writing this sermon. I'm retreading an old sermon. It's good for me to do that. That's called recycling, right? That's recycling. I could read it, but it's really long. But I will quote myself. I said long ago to another congregation, here we sit, believing we are at home, all the while knowing that the greater part of our existence is cloaked with strangeness and unknowing. We go through life often putting that away, only to have its ghostly chill surround us at the most unusual times. I remember, I said then when I was 20-something, riding in a hospital elevator going to see someone and finding myself pressed against a rolling bed looking down at an old man, probably my age now. He was yellow and frail, stuffed and strung with tubes, his breath long and wheezy. I looked at him until he looked back, at which point I quickly averted my gaze. I felt dis-ease. Have you thought about the word disease, that it is dis-ease? It is being uncomfortable in your skin. And strangeness is what provokes that. Whether it's a disease in your body or an encounter with an outsider, someone you don't know who makes you feel self-conscious. The scholar Rudolf Otto said that religion arises from our encounter with, here's German, ganz andere, the wholly other. Something he described, and I'm quoting him now, non-rational, non-sensory feeling whose primary and immediate object is outside the self. Something really different from you. An old man in a hospital bed right there. Dis-ease. Religion arises from our moments of dis-ease, when we become highly self-conscious. That is what strangeness evokes in us. No wonder we avoid it. I don't like it. I turn my head. How many times in seeing someone who we would call unhoused, do we make a point of not catching their eye? But in avoiding the strange, we lose our capacity for spiritual growth. We don't learn what we already know. The strange is what we need to encounter to learn. I'll quote myself again because I am so brilliant. I told this story about my own personal experience. This was very long ago. My poor spouse, she's not a part of it, but she witnessed it. For 4 years, a ribbon and brooch were pinned on a bulletin board in our apartment. The brooch was her grandmother's. When my wife looked at the board, the brooch was gone. Panic. For the next 2 hours, I searched through everything, every drawer, every corner, every pile of books and paper, all to no avail. I even went through the garbage piece by piece. Then, almost as an afterthought, I picked up the front cover of a book lying near the bulletin board. There was the brooch. That prompted an insight. Wait, what I thought I knew, my apartment, was false. What I thought was familiar was not. Strangeness lies all about us. We just prefer not to notice it. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy, says Hamlet. The world is a lot stranger than you think. And it's not just out there, it's all around us right now. We often speak of God when we speak of God as something inside all of us. And I would affirm that, absolutely. We use it to mean that we're all connected, which we are. But if Otto is right, there is another part of us that others do not know. Sometimes not even our closest mates. Not that we're hiding it, but it is impossible for one person to know everything about another person. After all, they're having thoughts and feelings that they're not even sharing right now. In our longing to belong, in our desire to be connected, to be welcomed, to be accepted, we can run right past the power of strangeness. But were I to venture a definition of spiritual community, it would be people choosing to be strangers together, to recognize that every one of us is an unknown as well as a known. And what's more, we have no right to know any more than we know. Their strangeness will always be there, full of stories, pains, glories, shames that we will never know. Every one of us, if we are the face of God, is also other as well as familiar, hidden as well as visible. The German poet Rainer Maria Rilke once defined love in a certain way. I'll back up for a moment and say, because you've mentioned it. We now say that Unitarian Universalism puts love at the center. Great, all there. So what's love? This too has its hidden and mysterious qualities. Lest we fall into the trap that love is a giant hug from which we are all enwrapped in some great big humid happiness. The German poet Rainer Maria Rilke defined love as two solitudes that meet, protect, and greet each other. Two solitudes. That is to say, I am close to you, but I respect your otherness as well as your closeness. The question I ask all of us as Unitarian Universalists is, can we cultivate protecting the stranger within us as well as the familiar around us? Yes, I mean the person sitting right there next to you right now, whose life and thoughts and feelings are unknowable to you. If a person were to spill out their entire life story, you would be here an entire lifetime. There will always be that which you cannot know. Can you protect and border and greet that? Can you welcome what you don't know? Can you embrace the stranger as a stranger and want no more than to protect and border and greet that strangeness? If this sounds bizarre to you, it's very old. Way back in Leviticus, a book I know you read on a regular basis, they were told, the children of Israel, by God Hashem, to love the stranger as yourself. Jesus didn't make that up. I just wanted you to know that. Loving the stranger as a stranger. How are we doing with that so far? We got a place to go, don't we? That's why this is a life practice, not a box to tick off on the way to heaven. Yes, we must cultivate some spiritual dis-ease, unease, when we love another. We have to be at some point willing not to know that other person and yet hold them close as we do not know them. Protecting, bordering, greeting the stranger in some ways is love in its highest form. It demands nothing. It expects nothing. And that is where our spiritual power lies, ultimately. What I hope for you is that by welcoming, you welcome the stranger, not just the one coming through the door, but the one sitting right next to you. the one whose name is familiar but whose life is too great to be grasped. What I hope for you is to practice protecting and bordering and greeting the other, the stranger, the one whose story might provoke a little disease in you. I'm looking, is it Bob? You have a story of monastic life. I did not know that. I'm not entitled to know that, but now I know there's a life in there that I did not know. Yes, please, every Sunday sing Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome. But go on and say Fremde, étranger, stranger, and mean that just as much. When you can do that, that's when love will truly be at the center of our faith. Thank you so much for letting me visit with you again. I look forward to seeing you in the future.